This episode is sponsored by Hired.com. Are you searching for a new job? That can be stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through the interview process just to find out at the very end that the salary, offer, or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Hired is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities in engineering, development, design, product management, data science, sales, and marketing. We make your job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of when and how you connect with compelling new opportunities. After completing one simple application, top employers apply to hire you, and on Hired you receive personal interview requests and upfront salary information so you can make informed decisions about what opportunities to pursue over a condensed timeline. Hired offers access to more than 4,000 innovative employers, including big brand names like Facebook and smaller emerging startups. The size and type of company you want to connect with is totally up to you. And we help you find new opportunities in 17 major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Open to relocation? Let them know. Your privacy and autonomy in your job search is of utmost importance. And if you sign up today using the show's link, that's hired.com/RubyRogues, you can get double the normal hiring bonus. That's $600 instead of $300. So go check them out at hired.com/RubyRogues.
Welcome to Ruby Rogues. I'm David Kimura, and today on our panel we have Eric Berry.
Hi there.
And today we will be talking with our guest, Allison McMillan.
Hello.
Allison, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, some of the stuff that you're doing out in the community?
Sure. So my name is Allison. I live in the Washington, D.C. area with my husband and son, who's 2.5. I'm a software developer. I was a career changer. So as a nonprofit executive before switching careers and becoming a software developer a few years ago. And locally, I am involved in helping with the RubyConf and RailsConf Scholar Guide program. I'm a conference speaker. I run a local Ruby meetup, Silver Spring Ruby, and for my day job, I am a software developer at Collective Idea.
Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of people have heard of Collective Idea with their delayed job, Jim. Or at least, that's the first time I had heard of them and stuff. So it's definitely cool. I think they had originally taken it over from someone else. Maybe they worked at Collective Idea or not. I'm not sure, but I know they maintain it and they do a good job with it.
Yeah. We love working on open source and yeah, we're a consultancy that works with a variety of companies, and it's a really awesome place to work. I've been there for just shy of a year and still really, really loving it.
That's awesome. So do they give you free time to work on open source, or is that part of your quote work schedule?
Yeah, so within our Workday, we're given internal time, and so internal time is like if I'm working on a conference talk or blog post for the site or open source time, we can choose to do that as part of our internal time.
That's awesome. It's really cool to see companies that encourage and support that kind of stuff. So you run a blog, and it's, I believe, Daydreams in Ruby. Can you tell us a bit about your blog and some of the things that you are putting up on there?
Yeah. Man, I've been blogging for a while. I started blogging because it was a really great way as I was sort of transitioning into the industry to write down what I was learning. And originally I was like, well, nobody's going to want to read this. And then I realized that I actually didn't care, because a lot of what I write is for future me to go back and remember solutions to technical problems or, remind myself. I recently did a post about getting feedback. So whenever I need to get feedback, I just go back to that post and I'm like, oh, right. Those were the 5 really well thought out questions that I want to ask my colleagues and peers. But yeah, and I write on a variety of topics, goal setting, some technical issues, getting feedback, a little bit about being a mom and a developer, running retrospectives, writing interactive workshops, just sort of a variety of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I have to totally agree with you that a lot of the things or blogging that I do, a lot of times that's for my own like documentation. It's like having one of those little multicolored composite notebooks where you just kind of take notes, but it's available for the world to see. So I think that's awesome. You definitely don't have to be an expert. Not saying that about you or anything more towards myself here. You don't have to be an expert to write a blog post, even a technical blog post. Just get out there and do it. It's good for you. It's good to get the exposure, and it's, a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and I found that when I was just starting out, when I didn't have a lot of code samples to show or things like that, I could sort of, I could point to blog posts or things that even like, oh, I was working on this tutorial and this piece was really difficult. And so I'd write a little blog post about it, or even like, here's a blog post about the 5 tutorials that I've done recently and what I thought was really effective in terms of me and my learning style from each one. And so it was really great to be able to sort of point to those and talk to those before I had, a robust GitHub profile and a lot more code or code examples to point to.
Yeah, I've been doing this for developing for several years. I still don't have a big GitHub profile. That could also be because of 3 kids under the age of 4 in my household.
I can't imagine how that would affect your ability to commit code and push stuff to GitHub. Just unfathomable.
Yeah, it's usually those 1 a.m. like Git commits called whoops.
Yep.
So it's a mess. So how was it like being a mom in coding?
Yeah. So becoming a mom was actually a really big it was a much larger transition than I thought it was going to be. I've sort of always been like a go-getter, and I like set a goal and then accomplish it and whatever. And when I became a mom, I found that a lot of the extra time that I had been putting into leveling up and learning and creating this robust GitHub profile, et cetera, it just disappeared. And part of that was a change in priority, wanting to make sure that I'm spending time with my child outside of work and sort of really cementing that work-life balance. But also just like your time is just so much less. You're taking care of this tiny human that relies on you for everything. Plus, so in addition to just sort of the taking care of tiny human bit, you're also, if you're a working mom, or even sometimes if you're not a working mom, I was pumping breast milk a bunch, and so you have to sort of fit that into your schedule. Mm-hmm. And there's setup and cleanup that has to be done sort of for that. And so, so becoming a mom made me realize that I sort of had to, and originally actually what I tried to do was just do everything that I was doing, but just like with a baby also. And I found that I was sort of like losing my, you chuckle, and that's like, it's hilarious because it's just not, it's like really not possible. And I found that I was sort of like losing my mind because I would work a full day and then do a couple of hours and get my, infant to sleep and then like log on and work for another couple of hours until 1 or 2 in the morning. And then you're not sleeping through the night, at least for the first 6 or 7 months. And so it was just really after about 4 to 6 weeks of trying to do that, I was so tired. I was so exhausted. I was like, I'm gonna burn out and leave this industry like super quick unless I sort of figure out a change. And I actually reached out on Twitter. I was like, Mom Devs, I need you. Where are you? Who are you? I need you, because I was just really feeling very, very alone and very isolated and very much like, I don't know anyone else who's a mom and a developer. Like, who are these people? Where do they exist? Are they still in the industry? And I was actually really, really lucky. I mean, I love the Ruby community. I think the Ruby community is really, really fantastic. And I was super lucky because I had a bunch of moms reach out to me on Twitter and offer supportive messages, but also offer to do hangouts and to chat. And so I chatted with a good handful of moms, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I remember those days." And they and they gave me some advice and suggestions, and they also gave me a lot of words of support and encouragement. And that was one of the talks that I've done in the past is called BDD, Baby Driven Development. And that talk sort of stemmed from this experience. Basically, once I had heard from all these moms, I was like, I didn't even know that moms in tech existed. Like, how do I bring visibility to the struggles, to the challenges that parents face, and not just moms, but dads and all parents and all sorts of family structures. And so I put out this big survey and got really amazing survey results and sort of crafted a talk about what sort of the main challenges are, and then what companies can do, what colleagues without children can do, and what parents can do to sort of try to make their lives as developers better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I couldn't even imagine trying to raise my children and have a full-time job, have that as a, responsibility. So I think it takes a real powerful person to do that. So that's amazing. I'm at home with my kids, after work and stuff, but it's not the same as, really being that nurturer to them. So I think that's really commendable.
Well, and it's a lot of partnership. I mean, my husband and I are sort of talking. We're constantly talking about, because we're both working full time, and so it's a constant conversation of whose job is busy right now. How can I support you? How can you support me? How can we support each other? How what do you need? What do I need? What do we feel like we're not getting? And we're as our son gets older, because I think in that first year, I think being a parent regardless is difficult, but I think biologically there are a lot of things in that first year that only a woman can do if you choose to go sort of the breastfeeding whatever route. And so there was a lot of him asking me how he could be more supportive of me in that first year, and then we're continually revisiting that and saying okay, now that he's older, what can you do, what can I do, what makes sense, etc.
That's awesome. It's funny that our kids also breastfed, and my wife would pump, so I could help out in the middle of the night and stuff. It's not the same. She can hold the bottle or I can hold the bottle. They won't take it from me. They would only take it from her. So the kids, they knew that was mommy. She's the one who feeds me and stuff. So I couldn't even imagine my wife trying to juggle a full-time job on top of that and stuff, burning candles at both ends, really. So that's awesome.
I've pumped in a lot of not great places to pump.
So I got a question for you. You mentioned that you were an exec at a nonprofit before. When did you make the transition, and what actually led you to make the transition to coding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was in the nonprofit world for, I want to say 6 or 7 years. And when I was an executive, I was the managing director, which at that organization was essentially the COO, so supervising staff and sort of doing everything internally. And when I came into the organization, it was really in this place of change. They were trying to re-engage with stakeholders and grow the budget and sort of examine programmatically what they were doing and how they could be more effective at the mission. And so I was really excited to jump in and get my hands dirty and do a whole bunch of different things. And my first year was super awesome and super challenging. We tripled our budget, and I was in charge of this multi-million-dollar budget, which was this new awesome challenge. And we tripled our staff, and we grew from an all-in-office staff to a partially remote staff. And there were just a lot of challenges, a lot of culture change, a lot of good stuff. And then like halfway through my second year, sort of things had calmed down and things were working and people were getting along really well. And we were seeing the fruits of our labor in terms of like the re-engagement of stakeholders, et cetera. And then I was bored. So, so I started getting involved in the DC Tech, the startup community. There's a really strong startup community in DC, and just started helping out with some of the things that I was doing at work, translating that into a startup environment. Got an idea for my own startup, so launched my own startup, left my job, and through doing that, I was working with this group of developers, and I said, if I'm gonna start this tech company, this website-based company, I really need to understand a little bit more of what I'm talking about. And so I did a Rails.
What was the developer response to that? Like when you said that and you actually executed on that, how was that received?
They were actually super excited about it. I was working with this really awesome group of folks, and I told them that I was going to do this Rails Girls workshop. It was the first one in DC. Honestly, I thought that I was going to hate it. I was raised in a pretty traditional household where like my brother did the math and science stuff, and I did like baking and dance and the like liberal arts, whatever sort of things. So I actually thought that I was going to have a miserable day. I thought it was going to be way over my head and way too complicated, and just like, I was like, but I'll make it through, and then I'll be able to have better conversations with my developers. And at the end of the day, I was like just so obsessed. I had an app up on Heroku, and it was so exciting. And I had I had worked through some error messages and some issues. And I was also lucky enough that the DC community is really open and welcoming to newbies and people sort of just getting started. And so there were a lot of folks there that were guides that were like, if you want to continue, if you want help, if you want guidance, if you want somebody to like look over your code, like we are all here to help you. And so I continued to learn while working on the startup, and the developers that I was working with were actually really excited about it. They were super supportive when I would like ask questions and do that sort of stuff. And I ultimately decided that it was time to shut down the startup when I wanted to add tests to the code base, but there were like not that many users on the site. I was like, I don't think that I have that like passion for this anymore. But I really loved being a developer, and so that's like basically I sunsetted the startup and just found my first position as a full-time developer.
Wow,
that's awesome.
So so how old's your son?
2.5.
2.5. Do you mind sharing his name?
Devin.
Devin, great name.
Yeah.
So you had your son. How much do you think that changed your outlook, your entrepreneurial, and maybe the way you treat your day job? How has that impacted that? And maybe are you now also taking, because you write a lot about goal setting, you write a lot about these challenges that you faced and overcome. How much of that actually comes from your experience of being a mother?
I think being a mom sort of put it into a new light. I think, there have always been challenges, and I'm one of those people that always tries to fit a lot into my day. But I was also always one of those people that I was like, well, if something's a priority for you, you'll just make it happen. Like you'll just, like if you want to learn to code, like you'll just find the hours in the day, or you'll just make it happen. And I realized once I had a child, like how ridiculous that statement is, because sometimes like those hours just don't exist for parents, for caregivers, for people that have multiple jobs. And sure, like you can make time in that day, but not without sacrificing your health and your mindset and all sorts of stuff. So people ask me all the time if I'm going to like do another startup in the future, and I'm like, not yet. I'm still not ready for it. Maybe in maybe in the future, if there's something that I come up with that I'm really sort of excited and passionate about. But not right now. And yeah, I think that a lot of basically the whole idea of goal setting and needing to maximize what I do in my workday came out of being a parent. Because I was like, okay, I used to have these basically like 7 extra hours in the day that I no longer have. Plus I'm getting less sleep. Like, how do I look at my day and reconfigure it, rejigger it, look at it from different angles and different aspects in different ways so that I can really like continue learning and leveling up and accelerating my career, but just keeping that to my actual workday. And there's no way that you can do that unless you're like organized and goal driven and have a plan of action around it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really organized for the most part, but there's so much about, even at my job, the monetary compensation, that's nice. I'm the sole provider for our household. However, the one thing that I really wish I could get more of is time. Even the best time management out there, you're still only limited to a fixed amount of time in a day. Without, as you said, sacrificing something. And it sounds like, you have your priorities pretty well in place with, your kid and then your job and, try to fit the learning in there. For me, it's just getting that extra time to do my side projects and stuff, because between kids and a job, that's your entire day. And then, who needs sleep, right?
Well, and it's really, and I feel like priorities need to, they also sometimes need to change, right? So sometimes if I, have a conference coming up and I need to put some more time into that or something, then I'll work it out with my husband. I'll say like, okay, for the next like 2 weekends, like I'm just going to have to spend less time. I'm going to spend a little bit less time with my family so that I can get in a couple of extra hours of work or whatever. And then, sort of like make it up on the flip side, make it up when, but I make sure that doesn't happen for more than like a weekend or two in a row. And we're actually really lucky. We have some family close by. So a couple of months ago, my husband and I sat down and we realized that we both had like a pretty intense 2 or 3 weeks coming up. And so my sister is also in DC. And so we talked to her and we were like, how do you feel about a weekend nephew visit at your apartment for anywhere between 4 to 6 hours? So, and fortunately, she's like obsessed with her nephew. My son is on our side the first grandchild and the first nephew, and so she's always happy to have some hangout time, especially when like my husband and I are not there, because then she can be like the cool aunt that does whatever she wants.
Yep. Yeah, I know how that goes. So whenever my brother takes one of my kids out shopping for a toy or something, I usually tag along just to make sure they don't come back with half the store.
Yeah.
Because, he's a single guy, good job, just no kids or spouse of his own. So I have to make sure he doesn't spoil my kids.
Yeah, the last time my sister was over, my son pulled out a bag of chocolate chips from the cabinet and asked if he could have chocolate chips for dinner. And I said no. And then he went to my sister and he said, I want chocolate chips for dinner. And she said, the next time I babysit, you can have chocolate chips for dinner.
That's awesome.
I was like, yep. If you're babysitting, whatever.
It's amazing how tiny these little kids are and how much destruction they can bring. So, yeah, different topic. I could go on and on about the destruction of our drywalls and stuff. So, because my son, he's 2.5 as well. So, or almost 3. And it's amazing what he destroys.
Yeah, they've just got a lot of energy. My son isn't a destroyer, but he's a climber. And so like the number of things that he just can gain access to is like incredible.
Yeah. Little tiny acrobats.
So you're giving a talk at the upcoming online conference. What's the talk on? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I am. So the talk is called Hack Your Workday to Maximize Learning. And it's basically, it's sort of this idea of like, okay, you have a finite number of hours. There's stuff that you want to do within that time period. And it's sort of specifically for developers, whether you're looking at increasing your technical skills or even soft skills like communication, giving pull request feedback, things like that. How to look at your workday and look at the tasks that you're probably already doing as a developer. And utilize those to really accomplish your goals. So we started a little bit about goal setting and sort of what that means and how to set effective goals, and then how to look at the pieces and the chunks of your actual workday to just focus in and see how you can maximize the things that you're already doing for those purposes.
This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide SSDs, 40 gigabit per second network connections, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your server on. It deploys Linux in seconds from the Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distro and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and they have a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line, so definitely go check them out. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, cloning, scaling, and everything else that you want. So definitely get the most out of your Linux node and check them out at linode.com. And check them out at devchat.tv/linode.
So you're saying that it's not requiring a lot of change. It's more identifying and solidifying existing practices.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's sort of like if you have a iteration planning meeting or regular retrospective, how you can use those as launch pads for additional personal reflection, for additional personal oh, this is what I've learned the last 2 weeks. We're looking at even just how you look at and take tickets for stories, for tasks that you're accomplishing, how you can look at those tickets slightly differently once you have goals set to make sure that you're internalizing specific lessons that you want to be learning more effectively.
Can you give an example of that? Like, what kind of goals would you have set when you're doing a review? I'm trying to think of that. When I sit down and do a code review, I'm like, my goal is to get it done and not be code reviewing.
What are you talking about for reviewing someone's pull request or actually writing the code?
Is that, I'm referring to what you were talking about on reviewing.
Yeah. So when you're reviewing a pull request, let's say that you have a goal around improving your ability to write tests, right? To get better at mini tests or RSpec or whatnot. When you're reviewing that pull request, you might stop at the spec file and say okay, and just think about it for an extra couple of minutes. So what are these tests actually doing? What's the structure here? Is it testing? What file is it testing? Is it covering? From what I know about testing or whatnot, is it covering that? Or if there's no specs file, if there's nothing being tested, should there be something that's tested? So you could just sort of blow through a code review and be great, everything looks pretty good. But if you have a goal specifically related to testing, to pause for that extra 30 seconds and just think, are there tests here? What are those tests saying? And so that's sort of a really simple example of how, if once you have a goal set related to a topic, you can incorporate it into stuff that you're already doing. Or if you're reviewing, like at Collective Idea, everybody code reviews. You don't have to be like the most senior person on the team to code review. And so if I know that if I have a goal related to tests and I know that I'm code reviewing somebody that is sort of known to be pretty good at testing, I'll make sure when I'm code reviewing to just like to read that a little more carefully and maybe even jot down some notes about like, oh, this person used this matcher or this like interesting format. And then it's in my, in my notes of like things that I've learned. And I'm internalizing it a little bit more than if I was just sort of skimming through and being like, yeah, those tests look great. Good. Thumbs up. Looks good to me.
Okay. So Collective Idea, I've also known about them for years and years. I think introduced from Ryan Bates through the Delayed Job Railscast. What do they? So it's so fun talking to people that work at different companies, especially successful Ruby shops, because they have these patterns and these things that they do that lend to their success. What's something that you can share that Collective Idea does that maybe you haven't seen before, and you're like, wow, this is a really good thing that people should know about?
This is a hard question.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't think that this is sort of a brand new thing, but I think that the developers that I work with at Collective Idea are really, really collaborative and really willing and interested in helping each other and sharing and making each of our individual and collective code better. So, there's a lot of sort of talk about best practices and, making sure that everything does have tests and that we're thinking really thoroughly about that. I'd say the other thing is that we often use Interactor, which is an interesting gem as sort of a pattern to pull out pieces of logic. I've seen that used more at Collective Idea than other places, and I think it's a really effective pattern, an effective gem to use.
I have not heard of that gem before.
I haven't either. I'm actually looking at it right now.
Yeah, same here.
Can you give a brief, what does it do?
So it basically, it pulls out logic into these smaller files. So, if you have some functionality that's being used in a couple of different places, or, if we can like delete this like mumbo jumbo of me rambling through words, that'd be great. So it says in the README, Interactor is a simple single purpose object, and it's really for looking at business logic and pulling it out into a very specific place. So it really sort of, it encapsulates that logic. So it doesn't have to be in the model or in the controller or in a lot of different places. It's just, they're all in sort of these various interactors.
That's interesting. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is just, like knowing what's going on and talking with each other about, about best practices and about sort of like constantly, improving our own code and improving each other's code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Eric, I think, what kind of captured my attention from what Allison was saying to answer your question, it was the words willing and interested in. I think that's what makes them successful, is that their developers are willing and they are interested in helping one another. I think that, and I've worked with some developers that were just, they were introvert to the extreme. They did not want to talk to you. They did not want to work with anyone else. They couldn't communicate with other people. And it made it very difficult to work with them because they were unapproachable. And I think when you have a team of people like that, you start to get into situations where the efficiency goes down. You start, having some merge conflicts of hell, because you're not communicating with one another. And it's just overall messy. So I think, as you were saying, Allison, working as a team and being willing to help each other and interested in helping each other, and that collaboration, not only will you reduce a lot of headaches, but you're also going to have a much more fluid code base, because you will start to adopt each other's styles where it makes sense. And then the application is going to read consistent. You're not going to have a lot of, different weird syntaxes, because everyone is working in the same kind of hive mind code base.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think what's also really nice about it is that it translates to like our work with clients. I honestly, like the last time that I was job hunting and looking for a new position, I was a little weary of working for a consultancy, because I'd heard so many bad stories about working with consultancies and like building the same app 20 different times, or, just crazy hours when you get to sort of deadlines and not a lot of work-life balance. And so I asked a lot of those questions when I was interviewing. And what I found is that, Collective Idea, one of the things that I really love is that a lot of the folks on the team have kids. So there is a really intense focus on work-life balance and making sure that like whatever your family needs comes first. That's really, really important to us as a company, but also that sort of that willingness and interest in growing each other and making things better. I think that comes across a lot in our work with clients as well, because it's sort of like, well, if you have that mentality internally and that respect and communication and whatnot internally, then it's just going to sort of like overflow into the clients that you work with as well.
Yeah, go on, Eric. Sorry.
I'm sorry. One of my heroes in the tech industry is actually Leah Silber from Tilda. And she actually wrote a tweet that I saw. It says, "My understanding of need versus want has changed dramatically post-kid. I feel silly for how much I did not get it before, you two." And I wanted to ask you if you heard about what they're doing at Tilda. And I see you nodding, so I know you do.
Yes.
So I'll let you explain it. Why don't you explain it and tell me what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, Leah's great. And I saw her at this past RailsConf. I bring my son with me to tech conferences fairly frequently. I joke that I joke that he like already knows the deal. Now he'll like walk into a tech conference and he already knows to like collect the stickers and go to like the booths and and she had her baby there as well. So we chatted a little bit about being a mom in tech and that sort of stuff. So what they're doing at Tilly is they have they're piloting this like babies in the office sort of program, and basically it's that you get a certain amount of time for maternity or paternity leave. I forget exactly how much it is and if it's paid or unpaid. But then you can bring your baby into the office with you, and so so you're still there. You're still sort of like able to do what you need to do, et cetera, and you have your baby with you. I think that there are pros and cons to this approach. I think, and I chatted with her a little bit more about it, just sort of offline to ask some additional questions. I think that it's a great approach if you have an office that understands that whether you're with or without your baby in that time after your maternity leave, like you're not going to be the superstar crazy you're not going to be leveling up. Like you can probably maintain status quo, or maybe I think it's important that you have an office and a team that understands that like you might not complete tasks as quickly, you might not be as available to pair based on how your child goes down for a nap. I mean, one thing that she does say in her article about it is she does specifically say that like bringing your baby into the office like does not work for every baby. And I think that's sort of another important differentiation is that every baby is different. Like some babies are colicky and are, wake up a lot at night or, sort of challenging. Others like, you can feed them and they'll drift off to sleep and they'll just be these, happy little creatures. I think that it's knowing your baby. I think that it's having an understanding team. It sounds like at their office, they also have a lot of setup for it. So, they've got sort of specific areas, which is probably really helpful. I do think that there's no substitute for being able to take an adequate maternity leave. And that was also in my last job hunt, a really important question that for me sort of felt like a double-edged sword. Cause I asked the question early, which I knew could be like a knock against me at some companies. But I asked what their maternity leave policy was. And, cause I really only wanted to be looking at companies that had progressive policies. And in my opinion, like 12 weeks of unpaid leave or whatever is not a progressive policy. And in my opinion, like 6 weeks of paid leave is also not a progressive policy. I think that there's no, this is one of the things that I think before I had a baby, I was like, yeah, 6 weeks, like that sounds like a long time. I can probably like, do the baby thing, have everything settled and then like get back to work. And it was really, really, your baby is just still so tiny at 6 weeks that it's so hard to drop them off somewhere. And there's also so many like logistics that you're still figuring out with nursing and bottles and, just all sorts of stuff, that I still think that there's no alternative for like a good paid maternity or paternity leave program. And she even says in her blog post that like one of the reasons why they came up with this as a solution is because they're a small company. And right now they don't feel like they can sort of afford to give the kind of leave policy that they'd want. And so this is like a good alternative for the moment. But yeah, I think that if your company can do an adequate leave policy, they should.
Yeah, and that's really cool to see companies that have those kind of resources on site, to be able to support a child being in there. I know a company in Louisville, Kentucky, a Ruby shop, Apris, that they had on-site medical. So you can go downstairs to their little medical facility and get health care, to get, flu shot, doctor visit if you're not feeling well and stuff. And, your family can come use those facilities as well and stuff. So that was really amazing. I almost, went to work for them at one point, just like for that reason. I'm like, that's really cool that they would actually have the sense of priority to have those kind of facilities available to the employees. And it really says a lot about a company when they think of those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, and flexible, like work from, I work remotely. I've been working remotely for years. But working remotely, like it just took on a whole different meaning when I had a child because I just, I had more time with him, like in the morning and in the evening. And like I said, I pumped for a year. I pumped until my kid was a year old. And just like being able to do that in the comfort of my home without having to worry about, door locks and sounds and fridges and all sorts of other stuff was just really, really, really nice.
Right. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about?
So you mentioned back in February on one of your blog posts that you were pretty frustrated with the developer community. You were frustrated because there was the call to open source, and I think that kind of stemmed this whole shift that I see that you've taken. My question is, are you still frustrated?
Now I'm trying to remember what blog post that was.
I think it was all surrounding time. Based on what you've been able to learn about yourself and manage your time and set your goals and reflection, do you find that you now have time to heed the open source call, so to speak?
No. Like I can honestly say that if I didn't get time through work to do open source and to participate, then there's just no way that I would have time otherwise. Because really the only time that I would have would be sort of late at night when like for me at least, like my brain is like so tired that it would take me so much longer to get things accomplished. And open source isn't easy to jump into and out of. It's sort of it can be a very scary prospect. It can be, even the code bases that have sort of like good contributing guidelines and whatnot, you still have to really like think through what you're doing and what you're submitting, et cetera, et cetera. And oftentimes like midnight when you've woken up at like 6 a.m. is like not that time. Yeah, and I mean, I think so. Open source is one thing. I think probably a lot of my frustration was this may have been around like the job hunt. The last time I was looking for a job, I was very frustrated with how many places had take-home code challenges and how they didn't realize how difficult those were for folks with outside commitments and responsibilities to complete. And mostly, actually, I wasn't as frustrated about that, but the part that really frustrated me was that when I would ask companies, when I would say, okay, what are the most important characteristics of someone that you're looking to hire? Oftentimes what they said doesn't match up with a take-home code challenge, right? So they would say a willingness to learn or curiosity, these various things. And I would say, okay, well, how does me completing this take-home code challenge, this specific code challenge that you are giving to me, how does that accomplish your goal of seeing if I am this kind of person that are your top 5 characteristics of someone that you want to hire? And that to me was like the most frustrating part, is that oftentimes folks like didn't really have a good answer, and they were just like, I don't know, because it seems like an okay way to like figure out abilities or something. And I will say that when I was last looking, I prioritized places that did pairing interviews, that had really thoughtful interview processes, because also, I don't learn anything about the company if I'm just doing a code challenge. If I'm pairing, then I can see like, okay, are these people that I want to work with? Does this seem like a fit for me as well? Because I want to find somewhere that's good for me as well as being a good employee.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the post that you're referring to, but I remember being very frustrated at that point.
Yeah. Good for you for calling them out, though.
Absolutely.
Well, and I tried to do it without, like, I didn't want to like burn bridges or like call them out, but it was more, and I was lucky enough that I was sort of like able to, I feel like, turn these into conversations, right? So companies would often loop back around and be like, oh, why didn't you finish our process? Or, or I'd be like, hey, can I chat with you about this for a second? So without being like, this is dumb and your process is dumb, right? Because I don't really find that that's very effective. But to sort of turn it into a conversation and just be like, food for thought for the future. Your interview process is your own, but this is just my perspective, and like, take it for what it is.
No, I'm pretty sure take-home quizzes are dumb.
Hey, I got the ball clock take home. Yeah. Go solve the ball clock. One last question.
Yep.
Sorry if you don't mind. One last question. Where does a woman who wants to get into tech, who is a mom, where can they go for support and guidance?
Yeah, that's a great question. In certain areas, there's a group called Mother Coders. I believe they're just in the Bay Area, but they're a really great place for some support and guidance. I think also there are a lot of, or I know in DC there are a lot of women in tech groups, and I think in other places there are starting to be more women in tech groups. And oftentimes, if you go to those groups wherever you are locally, your Rails Girls, your Rails Bridge, your things like that, you can find additional moms or resources or whatnot. I know that I'm on a couple of different Slack teams that have specific channels for parents or for moms, which is quite helpful, just for sort of like sharing stories and sharing resources and even just sharing struggles. So yeah, I think those are some good places to get started.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And Allison, how can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet. So my blog is Daydreams in Ruby. And I am Allie, ALLIE_P on Twitter. And those are probably the best places to find me. I also have a speaker deck profile, and I'm A Sharon on GitHub.
Awesome. Well, shall we move on to picks?
This episode is sponsored by Airbrake. I don't know about you, but week in and week out, I spend hours debugging my code when I could be working on building new stuff. Then I started using Airbrake.io, our latest sponsor, and the time I spent debugging was cut in half. Airbrake alerts you to errors in your software, then helps you diagnose and fix them. That means no more wasted time searching log files, and more time writing and shipping great code. Airbrake supports .NET and all major programming languages. Sign up at getairbrake.com/rogues for a free 30-day trial and the chance to win a $500 Amazon gift card at the end of the month. It's a completely free trial, and you'll be shocked at how much time it saves you. Again, that's getairbrake.com/rogues.
Sounds good.
Eric, what picks do you have?
Yeah, I have two. The first one, and we were talking about a little bit about strengths, and one of the things that they do at my company right now, Scipio, is we so everybody who comes to work at our company has to pay $9. It's the weirdest thing. They come and the first day like, okay, you got to pay us $9. And they're like, I don't. This is a little backwards. But what it does is it pays for this test, and it's about a half hour to take. It's called the Gallup Strengths Test, and I have taken it twice because I thought it was. I thought I didn't like the results of the first one, so I took it again. Got nearly identical results, but ever since then, I've learned so much about myself and so much about what makes me unique as an individual and what allows me to be valuable to others. But it also opens my eyes to the value of others as well, where I see each and every person has such unique skills and abilities that it really is pretty amazing. So it's the Gallup Strengths Test. The other one that I have, which is an unbelievable open source project, I think it's open source, is called Metabase. Metabase is a tool, and I don't have it pulled up right now, so I can't read you the blurb, but Metabase sits on top of your database, and it allows you to run extensive reports, create graphs. It lets you create tables where you can enter change information, and it allows you to embed stuff directly into your website. So a lot of times, how many times have we all written graphs and stuff like that, and written reports and tables and charts? And what they allow you to do is they just plug into your database. You create what they call questions, and then you can take those questions and put them right into your admin, right into your tools. So insanely powerful, and it's just given to you. These guys are amazing. So those are my two picks.
Awesome. And Allison, do you have any picks?
I've got 4. I hope that's
wow.
okay.
Yeah, let's hear them.
They're very varied. So first is a blog post that TableXI did about what they call the sticky note game. So they also do sort of goal setting at their company, and it's a little bit of guided goal setting. And they have this pretty cool sticky note game methodology in order to help people sort of brainstorm and set their goals. So I thought that was really cool. My second is Write Speak Code. Have either of you guys heard of Write Speak Code? Okay, so Write Speak Code is it's both a conference and they have local chapters in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and they're opening one in Atlanta. The conference was last week, and it's an amazing conference. It's like a working conference where really one day is writing, one day is speaking, one day is contributing to open source, and one day is focused on self-care for women and non-binary folks. And it's really an incredible network, an incredible working conference. And I think that you're just able to do a lot and meet a lot of really amazing women in tech at that conference and through those chapters. My third, so I was in Portland, Oregon for Write Speak Code last week, and I went to this ice cream shop called Ruby Jewel, and it was amazing. And I had brown sugar Marionberry crisp ice cream. So for folks that follow me on Twitter, I try to try like pastries or sweets or whatnot, like wherever I go. And so highly recommend Ruby Jewel. It was delicious. And my fourth one is it's called the Crystal Disc Assessment. So the DISC assessment is it's sort of an assessment that helps you figure out your communication style and how you communicate with others and how you think about communication, et cetera. And so Crystal, the website is crystalknows.com, and it's just this really awesome quick survey that is incredibly accurate. And if you are at a company, you can actually have a team profile. So you can look at, we recently did this at Collective Idea, you can look at everybody's communication style, and you can sort of see, okay, when I'm communicating with this person, this is a really effective way to communicate with them, or like this is sort of the information that they need when I'm talking through like a problem or something with them. So recently I ran sort of this short workshop about communication and whatnot for the team, and then the follow-up was doing this Crystal Disc assessment, which was fascinating and really interesting, and a really cool resource that we now have as a company to interact with each other more effectively.
Cool.
That's it. Those are all my picks.
Awesome. So my pick should be one that everyone is familiar with, and it's the Rails guides. So I like, just that's my bedtime reading material. So I love just going through the guides and reading them because there's always something cool in there or something I just did not know Rails had. So it's very easy to read guides, and I enjoy reading them. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Allison. It was a great talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you all later.
All right, take care.
Sounds good.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.